Didn't need your bloody microphone anyway. Hi everyone, and welcome back to this week's Remind podcast. My name's David Masterton, and I am with Dr Ashleigh Morland, and I hope I pointed in the right direction there. And in this episode, we are carrying on from last week's, which is talking about burnout. Last week we talked about productivity, and now we're going to explore it a little bit more, because productivity is one thing, or the overuse of productivity or the over-reliance on productivity is one contributing factor to burnout, of which there are a number of them. And so we're going to discuss that and maybe give you some clues and tips on how to recognize it, and we'll go from there. So good morning, afternoon or evening, Dr Ashleigh Morland. How are you today?
I'm good. Happy to be here after a little bit of an energetic off-air giggle before this episode. So I've still got that giggle energy in my body. I'm excited to talk about this. The reason that I thought that we'd touch on burnout is because when Dave and I were chatting, we're like, productivity is only one thing that leads to burnout. And it's not, productivity is not burnout. We can be productive in a really healthy, functional way, but it's the accumulation of too much productivity, I guess, that ultimately leads to burnout. So what burnout is it is a full body shutdown response, essentially. So it's a survival response when your nervous system basically just goes, it's not just about being tired, but it's that crash. So I use the analogy of Lightning McQueen's car just completely breaking down because he refused to take pit stops. Dave used the analogy last week about the plane falling out of the sky because
gliding, maybe falling.
No, it's crashing, mate. It's like crash and burning. So much like us in burnout. So our nervous system has to crash because it's kind of like the kill switch. So in burnout, the thing we refer to is this push-crash cycle. So that push, that overfunction, and then crash, rest, recover, and then push, crash. That is just the cycle that we learn to do life. And that crash is not a bad thing. It's your nervous system doing its job. But ultimately your body crashes because and your body burns out because it hasn't been heard. And so the types of burnout that we see the most often, I would say number one is that high functioning burnout, which is like, you look totally fine on the outside, but feel absolutely dead on the inside. Or for me, it's like when my body battery says it's on 5, but I'm still like, people would hear me talk or look at me and I still just look kind of okay. When I say body battery, it's a Garmin watch thing. So there's high functioning burnout, which is that productive, push, crash. Then there is boundary burnout. So boundary burnout is more like your people pleaser. It's you're constantly giving, you're constantly fixing, you're constantly saying yes. And then the crash looks like snapping. And there's resentment behind the snap. Then there's moral injury burnout, where moral injury burnout is like, we've done an episode on moral injury, and I strongly encourage you to go listen to it if you are not familiar with moral injury. But it's kind of like when you are in environments or you have to make decisions or behave in ways that go against your values or your sense of self, or you feel trapped or helpless. And if that's the overview of the things that contribute to burnout, the reason I wanted to touch on that before we talk about, well, what can we do about it? Like, how do we actually overcome it? Is because each of those things have a different entry point. And so they need different responses. If we just try and take a pit stop. Well, that pit stop is not actually helping me if my attributor to burnout is that moral injury. If moral injury is happening in my workplace, well, then it's actually healthier for my nervous system to either make some changes so that I am protective changes for my nervous system to withstand that workplace, or maybe I need to leave. Maybe I need to get a healthier job. Moral injury can come in relationships as well. It can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So taking a pit stop and trying to, bubble bath my way out of a toxic relationship is not going to help my burnout.
Oh, that needs to be a bumper sticker.
You
can't bubble bath your way out of a toxic relationship.
Yeah. Well, this is my point. So in order to be able to have the conversation around what can you actually do to overcome or prevent burnout, we need to understand, well, what are the contributing factors for you? And that's where that self-awareness and really starting to listen becomes so important.
So I'm picturing a triangle, right? And the first bit's productivity. Put it out on any point. Another point, there's obligation. Then on another point, you've got external validation, right? When you've got, in my mind, when you've got those three things happening in the center, the triangle's burnout. Because you're looking at other people telling you what you need to be doing. So either a boss, a partner, or something else. Then everything that you're being told, you carry that obligation that needs to be done. And then through the productivity, you're constantly working through this. So I've got to say, for me, the exit point of all of that, and I'm sort of explaining what I feel was mine, is the fact that I had to go within. And I had to realize, what is it that I'm doing from obligation and what am I being called to do? So let's go back to that toxic relationship. Let's go back to that job, right? And you sort of say the pit stop being a bubble bath. Well, yeah, you're right. Nothing's going to change. However, if you can't come back to yourself to go, actually, I need to make a big change, which is to leave that job or leave that relationship, or your inner side could be saying you only need to get rid of one of them, or you actually need to work on a reflection of yourself, which is creating part of this problem. If it's all external, you're going to stay in that loop forever, because what will end up happening is you might get out of that relationship, but it could be with a huge amount of resentment, because that relationship could be turning toxic, maybe because you're so focused on your career, because that's all you want to do, because your priority to make sure that you're a good person at work is
prove yourself.
Yeah, is more overwhelming. And then you've just labeled the person at home to be a nagging person. This is just one scenario. Of course, whole many other scenarios could be coming out. Or it could be that you've got this thing where you tip so much into at home, when you get to work, you're not performing. Because again, maybe you don't feel worthy because you have to do everything, because you don't feel as though you should be in that relationship, because they're a solid 10 and you're a solid -1. So it's like there could be all these different things. So it's coming back to yourself to go, what is it that I'm being called to change?
Yes, and I want to make a point that's really important, is that sometimes it's not about some traumatic experience where we learned something. Sometimes it's literally that we just learned it. We just watched someone else do it as if that's the way you do life. And we went, all right, I'm going to add that to my life instruction manual. And I think that's so important, which is why one of the questions we have to ask is, where did I learn this? Like, did I learn it from an experience where I made a mistake and then, felt like a failure, and so then I had to be perfect all the time to never, ever make a mistake again? Like, is that where I learned it? Or did I learn it because I watched my mum be the overfunctioner and took on the gender role of overfunctioning woman in the household? And this is actually not me, and it's not because of my own experiences. My husband doesn't expect it. There's no bear coming and telling me that I'm a terrible, awful person for not having dinner on the table at 6 p.m. But I observed that in my family home growing up. And so I just decided, I just took on. It wasn't even a decision, really. It was an agreement that, okay, well, this is just how it is. That's what you do. And so, yes, the examples you gave are valid, but I think we can't jump straight to like we've had an experience that made us feel a certain way when sometimes it is literally just what we learned. It's what people taught us.
This is what we talked about with the conditioning. Yeah, no one will cognitively go, I need to feel this hole inside of me with external things. They will not consciously make that decision.
No, but it can be a feeling.
Yeah, but
it can be led by a feeling.
Yes, but it's the conditioning that this is how you cope with this thing, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, again, caregivers and then their caregivers and the caregivers before them and society. No one sort of wakes up and goes, I want to be absolutely miserable today. And you know what? I want to wake up tired as hell. I want to go to work and I want to be around complete imbeciles that don't do what they're supposed to be doing, to go into a job that I kind of don't find any more meaning in, to then come home and be yelled at or whinged at or nagged at, to then pay bills that I just feel like are constantly never ending. Looking at a bank account, which is only just surviving, no one wakes up to feel like that. So it's sort of like, but we've been conditioned to say that's okay because that's normal, because if you want to fix that, just be more productive. Be better, right? It's sort of like, imagine all that crap going on and people saying, stop, look within what's going on. Why is it out of all of this that this is all purely external? What if what you're being shown here is an invitation to show what's on the outside is a direct reflection of the inside? Why can't that be a possibility? And then if you want to, and I know we spoke about this off air, you want to get that mirror to smile, it's not going to smile before you do. So imagine for a moment that your outside is a perfect reflection. Number one, how fucking scary is that? Like, why would I want to create this? What? Okay, for a moment, assume that you have. Because everything you've been doing up until now, is it working? If it's not, you want radical change? Let's be some radical change. Okay, we come back into ourselves. Then we start thinking, okay, so what are these things that I'm needing to do? And then for most of us right now, inner child work. It's a slam dunk. There's stuff there that we need to look at. Go look at it. Be gentle on yourself. Come back.
So inner child, but also parts. In all of our programs, we incorporate parts work because it's so important to acknowledge that some of those parts are literally valid parts of ourselves. There might be an afraid part. There might be a angry part, a jealous part. There can be lots of parts of ourselves. But, and I just had an experience with a client literally this week where we observed in her parts, there was a part that was critical and judgmental. And when we really sat with that, that part wasn't a part of her. It literally wasn't her. It was a part that was handed to her by a family member. And so as soon as she realized, oh my gosh, this criticism and judgment that's actually driving all this in the first place is not even a part of me, they don't get a seat at my table. It's as simple as just going, thanks, but you're actually not welcome here.
Well, thank you for your contribution, because it was a survival mechanism at some point.
As a child, but as an adult, no, not welcome.
Correct. Absolutely.
And we as an adult actually get to have that authority. And so I find this work really, really, really powerful, because then when you look at those parts and go, okay, is it valid to feel like to feel scared that you might get in trouble if you don't get all your work done today? Oh, okay, that could be a valid fear. I can understand why you might feel that way. And then there might be another part who might feel angry that, you work in such a stressful job. And, or for me, like I'll have a part where I'm frustrated with myself because I set deadlines that are often a stretch. And so there's the part of me that's feeling resentful that I've set a deadline that's too short, but then there'll be another part of me that feels really inspired and excited, which just wants to get it done and get it out there. And so it's like these conflicting parts. And I think that is such an important part of the conversation, because that's how we heal. Yes, there's inner child work, but it's recognizing that at different stages of our timeline and at different stages of our life, particularly our childhood life, which is when these parts of us were born, those parts of us were born through experience or learning, either our own lived experience or observing someone else. So it's the moment that those parts of us were born is the inner child work. But it's us reparenting those parts by loving and nurturing and responding to our inner child. And like the part of me that might feel stressed or I can't remember the example that I gave, but let's say there's a part of me that is feeling angry or frustrated, then to reparent that part, i.e. to do the inner child work, how do I respond to that part of me? What do they need to know? What do they need to hear? Do they need to be held? Do they need some encouragement? Do they need some certainty? And when I learn to meet those needs in a really safe and nurturing way, well, then the parts don't have to scream anymore. And I've been met and witnessed, and that's healing.
Absolutely. And I think when we think about this productivity, or you think about, like you were saying before, about getting angry because you set a deadline, right? Because you're really keen. I'm going to go back to the aeroplane. Love it. Yeah, this analogy's got wings.
So good, guys.
But imagine if you were to treat flying like your productivity, right? You know, the flight between Hobart and Melbourne is just over an hour, right? Now, basically, by the time you take off, you touch the sky and you come back down. Why is that relevant? Because when we think about productivity or burnout or things like that, it's like we want to be productive as quickly, as long as possible. But could you imagine taking off from one airport, shooting straight up in the air, reaching your cruising altitude, fanging along at cruising altitude, getting to the destination, and then just doing a absolute 90-degree nosedive into the airport? You can't do that. So
well, the other thing that came into my mind as you were saying that is, I'm about to fly interstate, and I thought sometimes, and I'm seeing this play out in my mind as I go, sometimes productivity can be around time, where if I've just got to go from, like, if my objective is to go from Hobart to Melbourne, and that's a 1-hour flight, how irrational is it to think that it's not a worthy or worthwhile flight because it wasn't in the air for 8 hours? Like, imagine leaving Hobart, coming and circling Melbourne for 7 hours so then you can land on hour 8.
Yeah, okay.
Because your productivity was tied to the hours you were working.
Yeah, I mean, that's the
analogy that just keeps on giving, Dave.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I was trying to think of something clever, but tapped out, might be out of gas. But I think what I'm trying to get to is, imagine your productivity, you're at cruising altitude. Right? That's your productivity. That's where you like to be with productivity. You need to come back and land to yourself. When you're landing, you're coming back to yourself and checking in. Right? Because again, if you stay in that productivity too long, the plane's coming down anyway. Either you can control the landing nicely or it will do it itself. That will be your body's way of doing it. So investing in your next lot of productivity means you have to land back into yourself. You have to touch your heart, close your eyes, breathe into it. What am I feeling right now? And so you can have this sort of natural, just sort of up and down, take off, land, right? And sometimes you might have to have a big leg in the sky, but you might also be able to prepare beforehand. Like, you can't take a flight that goes from Hobart to Melbourne and take it from Melbourne to London, right?
No, but also what I'm seeing in this conversation is the importance of remaining present as the pilot. Because
Correct.
the second we go into autopilot, we are no longer in control.
And that's the external validation. And this is where, when I talk about the triangle, right? Productivity, obligation, external. If you're just focusing purely on what people are telling you need to be doing, and you don't tap into yourself and figure out, what is it? Do I need a change of environment? Do I need a change of perspective? Do I need to go within and heal something, right? Because it could be either one of those, or a combination of those, or all of those. You won't know, but someone else telling you may not happen. When you figure out what the answer is inside of you, then go get the support. Or like what the work that Ash does is helps you discover through questioning.
And that's the tour guide. Exactly. Yep. And I talk about this because I was a uni lecturer for 12 years. The reason I don't just teach information, when you come and work with us in any of our programs at Remind, you're not buying a course. If you want to go to a course, go and study at uni. A course is just information. That's it. What you're buying is me, through my experience, being your tour guide to lead you into the depths of yourself, so that then you can understand what's really going on and then lead you through the healing. Because without the revelation, and revelation is actually a very spiritual word, without revelation, which is that that light bulb moment, that punch in the stomach, that deep, deep soul level realization of clarity and truth, you cannot experience transformation. And transformation is what everyone wants, but often we're only willing to intellectualize it and just try to understand it. Understanding is not enough to change our problems. If it was, then we would all psychoanalyze ourselves, do all the talk therapy in the world, and we'd never have an issue.
Done.
Happy days, off we go. But yet it doesn't. People find themselves with a deep understanding of what's going on, but then still stuck in their circumstance. So it's then about that self-reflection of revelation to lead to transformation, and the processes are the bridge that help take us from revelation. Now, what do we do with it into that transformation?
Yeah, it all starts with yourself. Yeah. So any support you're going to get is going to help you guide back to yourself. Any truth that you're going to find is going to feel good within yourself. And that's where the support mechanisms come in to sort of say, have you considered over here? Have you considered over there? And then with that feedback then comes I will help you through the experience and the knowledge and the understanding that I have to fast track some things that took me this long, but it might take you less, because if I had someone like me, then I would have been there a bit quicker. So...
yeah, 100%. And I think, the types of burnout I spoke about before, fundamentally, if we, in a nutshell, said, what can you do about it? Well, the high functioning burnout, easy. Just schedule in some pit stops. Schedule in daily pit stops. They don't have to be long. They just have to happen, and they have to be a priority. So schedule in some daily pit stops. I have a ponder chair just over there. The second type of burnout I spoke about was boundary burnout, which is where you're constantly giving and constantly more people pleasing, and then you end up resentful.
Again, external. Yeah.
What is that? So what do we need to do about that? We need to set some boundaries. We need to set boundaries with people. We might even need to set some boundaries with ourselves and with circumstances. We need to say yes to the things that feel like a yes. We need to say no to the things that feel like a no. And that leads me really nicely into the third one around moral injury, because moral injury is around being true to yourself. Moral injury is around knowing what your values are, and then being able to be very, very acutely aware of the circumstances and the moments in life that, or even people, places, workplaces that require you to abandon your sense of self and your values in order to comply, because that is moral injury. And if you can, where possible, start with some gentleness and kindness in peeling that back 100%. And being able to live more authentically without the fear of rejection, without the fear of abandonment, without the other fears driving the show that cause you to prioritize compliance or, pleasing someone else over living authentically, that's the work. And if you do want to go deeper, you know where to find us. We've got literally programs that lead you straight through this, but start there, because that's where you're really going to start to notice a difference.
Let's put it this way. You start, middle and finish is right there. Exactly what you said.
Yeah.
You are not going to fix a burnout and the overproductivity unless you go back to, why am I people pleasing? Why do I have a fear of rejection? Why is it that I have to have validation through what people tell me, the things that I own, or the job title that I've got? All of these things, you will not, to fix burnout, you fix all of that. And that's why, I can't remember if I said this episode or last episode, that the only way I got a handle on this was by opening these doors over here, which was around that, and it unlocked the other door and I unpacked that.
Absolutely, because burnout's not the problem, it's the solution. And it's exactly the same as addiction.
Yeah.
Addiction is not the problem, it's the solution. And burnout is the solution. It's the nervous system's kill switch to keep you alive. Because if you don't burn out and you don't crash, you die. That's it. And so how is your nervous system keeping you alive? It's forcing you into rest and recovery by forcing you to crash. And that is an intuitive, amazing, beautiful response of the body. And I think where accountability has to come in with this, and this is probably my own inner work that I'm moving through, is the push and crash cycles. Because I do work cyclically. I know that about myself. Dave and I have had a good cackle about how I'm a batch worker.
I was going to say bundle, but batch.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I like to do things. And for me, I know, like, as I said, I'm about to travel interstate and I need to schedule some downtime intentionally on the other side of that. Because if I don't, I will crash. And so it's about being able to intentionally tie in these strategies with intent, with consciousness, so that you can remain healthy and not be in that constant push crash cycle.
Yeah.
It's really important.
And I just heard from the back of my mind, that's good for you that you can actually find time. But what if I've got alligators up my bum hole? I've got other things flying over the top.
You should probably go and deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a cream for it for sure. But you know what I mean? It's like you've got all of these things. It's like I'm being pulled by this thing and this thing and this thing. How the hell am I going to put all this down? Well, you need to come back to yourself and sort of say, are all these things for you to hold? And for me, that's been a big thing. Hyper independent, single dad, runs his own business, doing all of that. They're sort of like, you know what? I trust myself over everybody else. And it's like, oh, there's a clue right there.
Where did you learn that?
Well, I mean...
and when was that part of you born?
But you know what I mean?
We can explore that.
And you absolutely need to explore it, because why do you have to be doing everything?
Yeah.
Right. And then, okay, what other things? Well, I'm a single parent and I've got this and I've got bills, and it's like, yeah, you got all of that. Okay. The answers are within you. Slow down. Come back to yourself. Well, I can't because everything will fall apart. Well, if everything is Gucci, then don't change anything. But if you're trying to stop everything from falling apart, maybe your next part within a healthy way is to let it fall apart.
Yeah. And actually, the image that came to my mind as you said that was trying to be the scaffolding holding up a house of cards. It's like, you know what? Sometimes you need to let it go and let the house of cards fall over, because that house is a crappy house.
Little pig, let me in.
Right? And so sometimes it's a good thing when everything falls over.
Yeah.
Because you've tried to build something that's not on a firm foundation.
Yeah.
And so when it does crash and when it does all fall over, yeah, you know what? It's going to suck for a little while, but then you rebuild.
It's going to be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, it's going to suck. But then you're going to rebuild on
Yes.
a firm foundation with a healthy fence line.
Yes,
And
because you're doing it
that's
from
the
within.
point.
And you're doing
So-
it from within. Yes.
Exactly. And if your biggest fear and the biggest thing that's holding you back from building something healthy is your fear of the unhealthy thing crashing, then you really need to look at your decision making around that and actually understand that you are choosing your circumstance because of fear or discomfort. And
Yeah.
that's harsh.
Yeah, and you're leaning into the
And
familiar.
it's true. Yeah.
True, 100%.
And also timing, I do want to say a caveat to that is that sometimes we can see it, sometimes we can know exactly what needs to be done and we don't feel ready for it. And that is valid.
100%.
That is
Oh, yeah.
so valid. So
Again,
I want
you will know.
to acknowledge that. Yes.
100%.
And I think when I reflect back even on my first marriage, I knew that my house of cards had to fall down and I knew that I had to leave that marriage, but it took us a process. It was a process of several years before I actually was in a position to do that.
And be gentle on yourself, because just because you get the awareness doesn't mean you have to be productive and get it done tomorrow. Hello,
Yeah.
David. Yes, I know.
Oh, no. Hello, the type 1 burnouts, the overachievers, the high functioners.
So
Don't
look,
have to have it done tomorrow.
yeah. So look, be gentle on yourself, and I say everything comes back into you got to land into yourself, and you don't land into yourself while being productive. You're either on the ground or in the sky, right? You can't be on the ground and in an airplane at the same time. So you got to come back, and then the more you do that, then you'll know the answers. Of which Ash needs to get from the ground to
The
an
aeroplane.
aircraft.
Yes.
So have fun, safe travels. Hope you've enjoyed this little. Are we going to call it like a 2-part thing on burnout?
I think it's a bit of a two-parter. Yeah.
Why not?
It's mostly just ranting, but
Yep,
it's okay.
yep,
Hopefully it's
yep.
helpful ranting.
Yep. I mean, for me, it's been caffeine fueled. So that's good. Well, until next week, thank you, Ash.
It's a
Thank
pleasure.
you, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.